He thought one search would disappear forever. It didn't. That one search stayed. It waited. And then it exposed everything. A tiny digital mistake changed his fate. He didn't notice it. He didn't think it mattered. But it did. More than anything else. Because it wasn't random. It was intentional. And intention leaves traces. The killer believed he was invisible. No witnesses. No noise. No mistakes. Just silence. But the internet remembers. Devices remember. Data remembers. Every click. Every move. Every search. And that's where he failed. One moment of overconfidence. One simple action. One search. And everything collapsed. This is that story. The case began in a quiet neighborhood where nothing seemed unusual at first glance. The house stood still, almost peaceful, blending into its surroundings as if it had nothing to hide. Neighbors described it as normal, uneventful, the kind of place people rarely pay attention to. But beneath that calm surface, something had already gone wrong. There were no loud noises reported, no signs of disturbance, yet something felt deeply off once authorities stepped inside. Investigators arrived expecting a routine situation, but what they found puzzled them. There were no broken doors, no shattered windows, no visible struggle. Everything looked controlled. Almost staged. It wasn't chaos they walked into, but order, and sometimes order can be more suspicious than destruction, because when a scene looks too perfect, it often means someone worked hard to make it that way. As they began examining the environment, they noticed how clean everything was, not just tidy, but carefully cleaned. Surfaces showed no fingerprints, objects were placed with precision. And there was a strange absence of randomness. It didn't feel natural, it felt deliberate, and that raised the first real suspicion someone had been here. And they had tried to erase themselves completely. With no immediate physical evidence, the investigation had a slow start. There were no clear suspects, no eyewitnesses, and nothing that directly pointed to what had happened. It was the kind of case that could easily go cold, but experienced investigators know one. Think perfect crimes rarely exist. Somewhere, somehow, a mistake is always made. That's when the focus shifted from the physical to the digital, because while someone can clean a room, erase fingerprints, and remove visible traces, digital footprints are far harder to control. Every device, every action, every moment connected to technology leaves behind a record, and in today's world, that record can be more revealing than any witness. The suspect didn't stand out at first. He appeared calm, composed, even cooperative. During questioning, he answered confidently, offering a clear and consistent story. His alibi seemed believable. There was no visible panic, no hesitation, but sometimes confidence itself becomes suspicious, especially when it feels too controlled. Instead of relying on his words, investigators decided to verify everything through data. Phones, apps, location services, and search history. These would tell a more honest story. Because unlike people, data doesn't adjust itself under pressure. It simply exists, waiting to be interpreted. The first step was checking his phone activity. On the surface, everything looked normal. Messages, calls, routine usage. Nothing alarming, but deeper analysis revealed subtle inconsistencies. Timing didn't always match his statements. Certain gaps appeared where activity suddenly stopped and resumed later. It wasn't obvious, but it was enough to question. Then came the search history. Among hundreds of ordinary searches, a few stood out. They weren't frequent, but they were specific. Questions about detection, about evidence, about whether certain actions could be traced. Individually, they might seem harmless. Together, they formed a pattern that couldn't be ignored. Timing made those searches even more suspicious. They weren't random late-night curiosities or unrelated interests. They were made around critical moments close to when the incident was believed to have occurred. That connection changed everything, because now behavior aligned with the timeline. Investigators began mapping everything into a sequence. Every search, every app usage, every movement. Slowly, a timeline emerged, not based on claims, but on data. And that timeline didn't match the suspect's story. In fact, it contradicted it in key moments. Next came location tracking. Phones constantly record movement, even when users aren't actively aware of it. GPS data placed the suspect's device in areas he claimed he had never visited. This wasn't absolute proof, but it created strong doubt. And doubt, when supported by data, becomes powerful. As more layers were added, the inconsistencies grew. There were routes taken during critical hours, stops that didn't align with his alibi, and movements that suggested something else entirely. Each detail alone could be explained. But together, they told a different story. Cloud backups revealed even more. Many people forget that deleted files often remain stored remotely. In this case, a small, seemingly unimportant file had been saved automatically. It contained metadata hidden details about time, location, and device activity. That metadata placed the suspect exactly where he said he was not. It wasn't an assumption. It wasn't interpretation. It was recorded information. And that made it incredibly difficult to deny. At this stage, the investigation shifted from suspicion to evidence. The digital trail was becoming clearer, stronger, and more consistent. It wasn't one big mistake, it was a series of small ones, all connected. The most critical moment came when analysts revisited his search history more carefully. One search stood out above the rest. It was specific, directly related to the type of evidence investigators were dealing with. It wasn't general curiosity. It reflected concern. That single search connected intention with action. It suggested awareness. It hinted that the suspect knew more than he was admitting. And in investigations, that kind of detail can be decisive. When confronted with this information, his confidence began to weaken. Responses slowed down. Certainty faded. Because now, he wasn't facing questions, he was facing proof. Investigators presented the evidence step by step, building pressure gradually. This approach is designed to break consistency, to make the suspect realize that the truth is already known. And it worked. His story started to change. Small details shifted. Timelines adjusted. And those adjustments confirmed what the data had already revealed. In the end, there was no dramatic chase. No sudden breakthrough moment. Just a steady accumulation of facts. Quiet, precise, undeniable. This case highlights a powerful reality of the modern world. Actions are rarely invisible anymore. Every interaction with technology leaves a trace, whether we realize it or not. Search history reveals thoughts. Location data reveals movement. Metadata reveals context. Together, they create a narrative, one that is often more reliable than memory. The suspect believed he had covered everything. He cleaned the scene. He controlled his words. He maintained composure. But he overlooked one critical detail: his own digital behavior. That oversight became the turning point. Because while physical evidence was limited, digital evidence was abundant. And it told the story he tried to hide. This wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was analysis. Careful, methodical, and precise. The idea of being invisible no longer holds the same meaning. Not in a world where devices record, store, and connect information constantly. Every click matters. Every search matters. Every moment leaves a mark somewhere. And once those marks are connected, they form something powerful: truth. This story is not just about a crime. It's about awareness. About understanding how modern systems work. About realizing that actions extend beyond the moment. Because in today's world, forgetting is rare. Systems are designed to remember. And that memory can become evidence. The suspect made one small mistake, just one. But that was enough. Enough to raise suspicion. Enough to build a timeline. Enough to connect everything. And once connected, the truth became impossible to hide. That is the reality of modern investigations. Data doesn't panic. Data doesn't forget. Data doesn't lie. And when it speaks clearly. The search that was meant to protect him became the reason he was exposed. One action, one record, one truth, and that was enough to end everything.